Purging. That was my word for January. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking about what that means and how we can purge a lot of negativity and time wasters like out of our life so we have more time to be successful. So let's purge our negativity together. So there's so many different ways that we can purge, right? So the first thing that sort of comes to mind is just excess stuff in our life. So organizing, getting rid of, like when you go into your house and it feels chaotic and there's just too much stuff, or you like open your wardrobe and you're like way too much clothes. Like you guys probably already know about the 80-20 rule. If you don't, we'll do a video on that. But basically like 20% of your wardrobe you wear and 80% you don't. And you don't want to get rid of all the 80% that you don't wear, but there's probably a bunch of stuff in your wardrobe that you could get rid of, you can purge. Because the idea is when we unclutter our space, we can become more creative, more spontaneous. It brings us more joy. That's why there's all these books about like tidying up to be joyful and uncluttering and all of that. Purging stuff that we don't need, we don't want, we don't use, and maybe other people can. So that's your giving break for the week, right? Is purging stuff you don't use, but maybe somebody else will. But the goal being is to just free yourself of too much stuff, so that you can be happier. So another way that we can purge is figuring out like all of our time suckers. Like what is sucking out the time throughout the day that we're not aware of that maybe we can get rid of. So much of our day we kind of waste away, and that's very different than like specific time that's self-care time, right? But there's a lot of times like during the day we don't even realize like how much we're on our phones and we're scrolling, like sometimes hours. And there's even apps that you can track how much you're on your phone and like what you're doing on your phone. It would be interesting to find out, but we're wasting so much time and we only have a certain amount of time to do what we want. And we always feel, or at least I know, like I feel stressed a lot because there's so much to be done, right? So if we get rid of a lot of these things that waste our time, it gifts us more time back to do self-care, to go out with friends, to do fun things. So the first thing we got to do is like figure out like we got to be self-honest. Like, what are the things that waste our time? You know, like how often do you scroll? And maybe that makes you happy, but then do that specifically, like schedule time to scroll. So you're doing it in a way where you're aware of exactly how much time you're spending and you're not spending too much time. And a lot of times when we scroll, don't always feel great afterwards. So then it's a waste of time and we don't feel good. And we could have spent that time doing something that makes us happy. So the first thing is like being aware of the amount of time I'm on social media. Then how much of that do I want to cut out of my life? You know, and that's up to you. But there's a lot of time where we're on our phones. Or how much time do you spend watching TV? And I'm not saying, like, I'm an actor, right? So, like, I love watching TV. I love watching great acting. But sometimes we watch or binge too much. So just being aware of how much time we're spending doing things is super helpful. And then you can decide specifically how much time you really want to spend doing something. Another thing to be aware of is like how much time you spend like what I call putzing around. You know, like, oh, I could do this. And then you're like, oh, I forgot. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to clean a little bit. But then you're like, oh, I got to do this. And then maybe an hour's gone by and what have you really done? Not very much, because we haven't been specific with our time, right? And sometimes it's okay to schedule putzing time, what I call putzing time, because it's okay to just wander around and do whatever you want, but we don't want it to become a habit and a time sucker, right? We want it to be either specifically because that's how you enjoy your life, and maybe that's part of your self-care. Like, I'm gonna get a drink that I like and I'm gonna putz around my house and do different things. But what we don't want to have happen is like you get to the end of your hour and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't do a darn thing and now I just wasted an hour. So the idea is really being specific about how you spend your day. So I would say like log it for a couple of days and really get honest with how you're spending your day. And then you look at it and then what can you purge? That doesn't mean like getting rid of all scrolling. Like it's not all or nothing, but maybe you're spending an hour and a half scrolling or going on to social media. Maybe you can only do 30 minutes. Like, you have an extra hour for your day. And it isn't an hour doing something you don't want to do. It's an hour that you then get to do self-care or something that you want to do that's going to maybe fill you up, make you happier than that hour of scrolling. So be aware of what you're doing and then start purging out some of the time-sucking things that you're doing. Okay, another thing we can purge, and this is like a little bit of a hot topic, and I've talked about it before, but purging time with friends that don't make you feel good. We only have a certain amount of time, and we want to spend that time with friends that build us up, make us feel happy, and we want to purge the friends, or at least a lot of the time with those friends that are very negative. Or even like sometimes family members kind of are negative. That doesn't mean like get rid of them from your life, but you can purge some time with them so you can make time for people that make you feel good. So again, it's about awareness. Like, how much time do you spend with who? And then how do you want to reconfigure that so you can purge out a lot of the negative time that you're spending with people and fill it with really good time? Okay, this is kind of a weird one, but I want to touch on it. So I want to kind of purge perfectionism. And what I mean by that is like too much perfectionism, because what happens sometimes is we spend too much time on a certain project. And the problem is there's no such thing as perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And so we end up spending like way too much time on one project where maybe an hour before that, 2 hours before that, like it was good. It was really good. And it was good enough. So I don't want you to half-ass something. I want you to put your all into it and make it good. But sometimes we're afraid that it's not good enough, or there's some anxiety that goes with it. And so we keep trying to make it perfect. And then we waste a lot of time with something that's not doable. So really figuring out, like, sometimes when are you going too far with a project?
No way.
Too far with something. I mean, even thinking about clutter and organizing your house. Like, your house will never be perfect. But just doing small amounts and like getting your wardrobe really good, but maybe it's not perfect and you could maybe come back to it later. But doing things so it's really good, but not wasting that extra time on perfect, when you could be using that time for, again, for self-care,
Yes.
or for good friends, or starting another project. So just being aware of time suckers when it has to do with perfectionism. So there's a lot of different ways that we can purge. Those are only a few, but we can feel, when we purge in the right way, we can feel lighter, we can feel more joyful, and we can have more time to schedule doing the things that make us happy. And we only have a certain amount of time in our life. And the older I get, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. So get rid of this stuff that's not serving you and fill yourself up with the stuff that is. Now that you have more time, like, I think you've got a little bit of time to get those thumbs up. So hit the like button and comment, like, what are other ways that you could purge things out of your life? Because people read these comments, and I swear, and even I and all of my team, like, we get a lot out of your comments and we get inspired by things that you do. So let's do this together. And if you have any ideas, just comment down below. And check out our other videos. Let's revamp this year.